Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dan Wilkins, joined by David Cohen. We bring you episode 5 of the South Jersey Starting Nine podcast. This is the podcast that brings you coverage of high school baseball and everything in between, from the college to the professional levels, right here in our backyard of South Jersey, here on Dan Wilkins Broadcasting. We have not seen you in 3 weeks if you're just a SJSN viewer, but in general, we haven't recorded an episode in 3 weeks, so it's been a little bit of a dull period, but we've also gotten to see, a lot of great non-conference games in college baseball. We've gotten to see some players make commitments, and we've also gotten to see a lot of schedules come out. We're going to reserve that for next week. We do have a lot of schedules that I have just on my phone and listed for the 2026 baseball season, but we are going to reserve talking about that for at least another week or so when we are on the air next, because we will probably devote most of an episode to that as we get deeper into the end of the off season. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but at least, well, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel some days. Not today with this
No,
rain. This has been a very sludgy, rainy day.
it's been a weird day, at least for me. I mean, like last time we did an episode, it was sunny out,
Oh yeah, and we
and
did it like 2 p.m. too, so it
yeah,
was like got a lot of natural
I
sunlight.
remember saying like, "Oh, baseball's almost here." And now you wake up today, and it's like, we're still in winter.
But a lot of the snow is melting, which is a good thing.
Yes,
It's a very good thing that the snow is melting. I'll tell you that much. And um, I wonder how long those snow piles that are like in the ShopRite parking lots and whatever. I wonder how long they're going to last. At least until April, I'd have to guess.
great.
But no, I mean, I'm looking at the weather app, and there's going to be like a switch that's flicked. Friday, March 6th is going to be 52 degrees. And then the next day is going to be 68, and then it's going to be 70s most of next week, March 9th through the 13th, which is funny because that's exactly when our basketball coverage will end. The sectional final, the last sectional final, is going to be on Saturday, March 7th, and then immediately the weather just instantly rises. It's like it knows that baseball is around the corner. But no, I'm very excited about it, and we've got a lot of RCSJ stuff coming up. We've got Camden versus RCSJ on Friday. Then RCSJ will host the Bronx Broncos of New York on Sunday, March 8th. Really excited for the JUCO season. Really got to talk with a lot of the guys on the baseball team. They're really amped about it. They're 1-1 on the season, but we will go into that in a little bit further detail later on. We're going to go for today's, I guess you could say, itinerary. We're going to talk about a new coaching hire, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Cam Flukie, who was injured last week. We didn't have a chance again between the time that he was announced that he was injured and now we didn't have time to talk about it. And then we're going to go into a little bit of a broader college baseball discussion, and then we're going to talk about the Cape Atlantic League. We're going to preview them as we get deeper into our preparation for 2026. And without further ado, we're going to start talking about our first news of the day. And again, in 3 weeks, we haven't gotten a whole lot of bombshell news or anything. But the one piece of news that is pertinent is that Miles Taylor, the former pitcher at Coppin State and a Timber Creek grad, has come back to his home program, and he will lead them for the 2026 season. He replaces longtime head coach and a good friend of the program, John Cates, who led the team from 2018 to 2025. And as we said, Miles Taylor was a Division I pitcher at Coppin State in the NEC. And Timber Creek, they haven't been excellent in the last few years, but they haven't been bad per se. They've, riffed off about 10 to 12 wins every season. They've been hanging around 500 for, as long as we've been covering baseball. But that's also because the Tri-County Liberty is a tough division. It's tough to top Delsey, with how good they've been transitioning so smoothly from the Joe Smith years to now the Vincent Landino years. It is so difficult for anybody else to get ahead, whether you're Highland or Triton or Timber Creek or even Cumberland, who, has shown some signs of success under Kyle Daddario. But, 2022, they were 9-16. the last time that they had an above 500 season was before COVID, so that was Kate's first year, 13 and 12 in 2018. But listen, I think Timber Creek's got a lot of talent, and I think that Miles Taylor, especially as a former pitcher, is going to be able to utilize that talent well. Timber Creek had an ERA just over 4 as a team last year. A pitcher that I really liked when I saw him last year was Anthony Hedenberg. He's a sophomore, had a 2.7 ERA, 38 innings. He didn't strike out a lot of guys, but he's a ground ball pitcher. You know, he's somebody who initiates contact. Think he rides the fastball somewhere into the high 80s. But Timber Creek's one of those places that's definitely a pitcher-friendly ballpark. And with Miles Taylor taking over the realm, you know, again, the offense hitting around 250, you know, right around the middle of the road. But a Timber Creek pitching staff led by a former Division One pitcher could do some damage on the hill.
Yeah, I think it's a good hire. Miles Taylor. Schools always like to bring back their alum, and Miles Taylor's a 2011 grad at Timber Creek. And you mentioned the Tri County Liberty. It's a really good division, but we'll see if Miles Taylor can get Timber Creek over that hump and back to that 2018 season where they were one game over 500. And it's always good to have a good pitching coach and a head coach overall.
Absolutely, and again, he replaces John Cates, who has an administrative role in the South Jersey Coaches Association. So I am curious if he's going to take another job somewhere else, and if this is the reason why he left Timber Creek. But he definitely left his mark on the program. You know, they've had some good years. Again, the final record doesn't define everything. They've had some good players over the years, especially when we got to see them last year. So hopefully, we get to see some better years out of Timber Creek down in, I guess you could call that, I don't know if it's Blackwood, Sicklerville, Ariel,
Sicklerville.
a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's your coaching hire, Miles Taylor. Our second piece of news, we talked about Cam Flukie. He is out for 8 weeks. It was announced by Baseball America sources on February 25th that he is going to be out for approximately 8 weeks with a stress fracture in his rib. Now, 8 weeks would bring us through the entirety of March and most of April, which should be, I mean, that's pretty devastating because that cuts deep into conference play. And one thing that I'll say is that he was not the only one. There was another pitcher for Coastal Carolina that also was injured, if I can find it. Hayden Johnson. So this was reported by Kendall Rogers of D1 Baseball. It was reported that Kendall Rogers, another left-hander, we're showing it on the screen now. Two of their top starters, the left-hander Hayden Johnson, he's out with a stress reaction in his elbow. Hayden Johnson is number 59 in the Division One college baseball top 150. Cam Flukie is number 6, and like we said, we talked about all year and all offseason the hype between Flukie and even a lot of the pitchers that are going to be on the Coastal staff, like Jackson Smallets of Gloucester Catholic. You know, Frank Carone was supposed to be at Coastal Carolina before he got drafted by Milwaukee in last summer's draft. So, you know, listen, Coastal Carolina, they are the best mid-major in college baseball right now. I think that the Sun Belt is going to be a very tough conference, and the window just opened for Southern Miss and the rest of them if they are able to play their cards right, because with how pitcher heavy that conference is, and especially with Coastal already having to replace Caden Bodine, Southern Miss is actually ranked higher in Division One than Coastal right now. Southern Miss is number 11, Coastal's number 16. I just think that it's going to be a lot harder for Coastal to go from runner-up in the College World Series to now losing a lot of their star talent this early in the season.
Agreed. I mean, like Coastal Carolina, they're off to a rough start in non-conference play, 6-4, and losing your best pitcher, a top 10 overall draft pick projected in Cameron Flukie. That's no joke. And losing that other left-hander, these other guys for Coastal are going to have to step up to get back to the College World Series. But that Sun Belt Conference is no joke. Southern Miss is a really good team, so Coastal's got their hands full.
Yeah, not to mention guys like Old Dominion, who's got some South Jersey talent as well. You know, I'm looking at their schedule right now, and we'll also highlight it on the screen here. So they actually picked up a really big comeback win over Ole Miss on Sunday. That was at the Houston Astros ballpark. They played 3 games in, I forget the name of whatever showcase was there, but they lost to Texas 8-1. Lost to UTSA 16-10. Now UTSA is in the top 25 this week. They are ranked 25th. So I think that they're going to have a very good season as well over in the Conference USA. But then they picked up a win over Ole Miss on Sunday, which they're 10-2 in non-conference play. Going 1-1 versus SEC teams, I can't be mad at that because Ole Miss isn't a bad program. But I think that their next couple of weekends are really going to define how this season's going to go in Conway. They've got East Carolina this weekend. They've got Appalachian State on the road in Boone, North Carolina next weekend. And, listen, they had a loss to Illinois. Not that easy of a pill to swallow. They lost to the College of Charleston. But otherwise, the teams that they did beat, I don't want to call them, lightweights, but they definitely are not superstars like Fairfield or VCU. They beat them twice. They beat Campbell. They play them again at Boys Creek in mid-March. So, listen, in college baseball, I was talking to somebody about this today. It is so difficult, and sometimes it's arbitrary to look into the non-conference schedules this much. In college basketball, for example, because you're a big college hoops guy,
Yep.
we talk about non-conference schedules and what it means to play tough competition. And like, imagine if Duke had lost to a team, or UConn had lost to a team that was a mid-major that wasn't really all that good, or maybe lost to a bad Power Five team. I think that a lot of people would be very reactionary about it. Danny Hurley, he would
Yeah.
be, he'd be irate if he lost to the College of Charleston. Or give an example to LSU. They got creamed by Northeastern last night. They were down 10-0 after 3 innings. But Northeastern is a 50-win team that had an amazing season in the CAA last year. There's not a lot of guys that can stop them. LSU, however, is the number two, or at least was the number two team in the nation. So people hold college baseball to a scheduling slash competition standard on the likes of college football and basketball, where one loss can derail your season, which I disagree with. Even the best teams in baseball are going to lose sometimes. So if we come back in 3-4 weeks and Coastal Carolina drops that weekend series to East Carolina, they lose to Wake Forest, they lose to Appalachian State. Let's say going into April, they've got two series to close out March between James Madison and Marshall. Marshall's okay. James Madison's pretty good. I mean, Marshall's 4-6 in non-conference play. They lost to Winthrop and the Citadel. They're not all that hot right now. If they lose to them, then we can panic,
Yeah.
because that's a 3-game series. That is where you have several chances to prove yourself. If that is the case come April, then we can start panicking about the Chanticleers.
Agree. Then you can hit the panic button. Baseball all depends on pitching matchups. If you're getting a third, fourth guy in the rotation, you got a better chance to win. In basketball, you're throwing the same 5 to 8 guys out there every night,
Exactly.
and you're playing a lot less games. That's the main thing there.
And one thing that I was having another conversation with somebody the other day about this is part of sports to have a greatest of all time, or like, if I wanted to rank the top 20 Major League Baseball players of all time, it would be almost impossible. But because who is the GOAT? But when we talk about how spirited of a conversation the greatest of all time is, the most nuanced conversation that exists is the NBA, because it's between primarily two guys, Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. I'm sorry, and LeBron James. Kobe Bryant's a close third. The reason why I say that is that I have heard people call Kobe Bryant a GOAT, and or the greatest of all time, as an alternative option to both Jordan and LeBron. But again, that is a sport where it is very individualistic. You can have a star player or two on your team, and the rest of your guys can be very standard players, and you can win a championship. I think of Barry Bonds. He never won a World Series. He only made one of them, if I'm correct, 2002. But in that 2001 2002 team, the 2001 season where he hit 73 home runs, who were the guys on his team? Benito Santiago was the catcher, 36 years old. Now, don't get me wrong, Benito Santiago is still a great catcher, but he was 36 years old, no business, being the battery mate to, what was Kirk Reuter and Rob Nen and Levon Hernandez, the rest of them. First base was J.T. Snow, 33 years old. Jeff Kent was the second baseman, 33. And you get my point. There were not a lot of great players. Like, there was, off the bench, they had John Vanderwall and Sean Durston, two relics from the 90s, and not to mention a 40-year-old Eric Davis. All three relics from the 90s that just did not translate into the new millennium. But um, baseball's got 26 players on a major league team. At the time, they had 25. So every player matters almost equally. And the counter argument to that is, what about football? Because they have 53 players. Well, they literally have things called skill positions in football: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. Your left guard is not going to be the reason why you lose a Super Bowl. A relief pitcher can absolutely and has been the reason why teams have lost championships or series. So in baseball, to close out the tangent, it is a very nuanced sport when it comes to why we debate who's the greatest, or why we debate the teams that have done the best. It is a better conversation to have of who are the best teams of all time than it is to have who are the best players of all time, and that will be a discussion for another day. But I wanted to get that out there because listen, it's the off season. We don't have a lot of news, and we've had full on discussion episodes before, so why not have a little bit of an extra tangent? Our next piece of, it's not news, but we're going to carry in the discussion a little bit with college baseball. We just talked about Coastal Carolina a little bit. Um, One thing that's intrigued me to open up this piece of discussion is looking at the top 25. UCLA number 1, LSU number 2, Texas number 3, Mississippi State 4, Georgia Tech 5. Most of those programs that are in the top 10, to name a few: Mississippi State, Arkansas, Auburn, North Carolina, they all have players that have either committed to or are currently playing from a South Jersey program on their roster. North Carolina's got Ryan Lynch out of Morristown. Um, Arkansas has the commit of Alex O'Dude. And I completely forgot to include this as a news piece. How about Cooper Birdie
Yep.
committing to Mississippi State, flipping from Tennessee after Tony Vitello left to go to the San Francisco Giants? But we could talk about that as well. Mississippi State, number 4. A lot of people excited to have him in Starkville. Reading the comments of his
Yeah.
post, they all seem elated to have Cooper in Starkville, Mississippi. But, listen, college baseball right now, the last top 25 was made yesterday on Sunday. It's going to be on Monday, very difficult to judge at this point in the season. And
It's
that
too early.
it's way too early.
Oh.
Listen, I think that, like in college football, the first 4 weeks of the season, when Alabama plays, we want you University, when they play, when Alabama plays Rowan University in the in week 0, um, you know, listen, why do we look at top 25s this early? We want it. The question that is a little bit rhetorical, but the answer is, we want to look at who is playing well against strong competition. And the top 25 this early, when you don't have any conference games behind you, will not help you if you're not playing tough teams. Just because you're good, you're not going to be, say, rewarded from the top 25 if you do not play good teams. So, and that's at least a D1 baseball top 25. That is who I go off of. I think the NCAA rankings are a little bit shakier. I trust these guys as a news source for it. But going down the list, and we'll pull up the list on our screen as well, and we'll zoom in a little bit to make it easier for you. 6 through 10 is Arkansas, Auburn, UNC, Florida, and Georgia. 11 through 15 is Southern Miss, Oklahoma, NC State, Clemson, and Wake Forest. And Clemson's had an interesting year as well. How about that series with South Carolina? They won that series
Yeah.
after losing the first game. One of the most spirited rivalries in college baseball, and really in all sports. But then Wake Forest in 15 also had a lot of South Jersey talent on it. They've got technically not South Jersey, but
Yep.
Chris Lavonis.
He's off to a great start there, man. He's pitching well.
Coastal Carolina at 16, and then through 20, TCU, Oregon State, Tennessee, and Florida State, and then 21 through 25, Kentucky, Texas A&M, West Virginia, who has they did have Ben Hudson.
Yep.
Now he's at Penn State, but they still seem to be doing fine without him. Miami, who's got Tate Darius out of Gloucester Catholic, and then UTSA, Texas at San Antonio. The Roadrunners, they're number 25. also in that. How are they doing this year? Looks like 10-1 in the AAC. I don't know why I said Conference USA. They're in the AAC. But listen, in college baseball, we've seen a decent amount of transfers, and we've seen a decent amount of players, still still settling into their homes. Um, is there a program on your mind that you think is going to be one of the best to produce South Jersey talent? Because right now, I'm looking at the top 25, and they all have a few South Jersey players on them. But at the Division One level, when it comes to who recruits South Jersey the most, really the biggest programs are the local ones in Division One. LaSalle, Ryder. Ryder's not off to a very hot start, but LaSalle is. They're 7-2. They've played. I think they might be 8-2 now. I was worried a little bit when they opened up their season with I think it was Maryland Eastern
Yeah.
Shore. They put up like 7 runs in the first inning versus them, and I was like, okay, these guys are actually going to play like a legit college baseball team. And of course, UMES has not had any historical success, but
Bad
at,
success.
was that
Bad success. They had that.
the famous 0 and
Yeah.
48 season, the infamous 0 and 48 season 2 years ago? But yeah, I mean, listen, it is very hard to judge a program that's new, and I'm very happy that the LaSalle program has been doing good. Delaware's been hanging in there with Greg Bamula. They've had a little bit of a rocky schedule, but they've also scheduled way up. Like
Yep.
they have really put themselves to the test. And by the way, we were talking about Coastal Carolina. They're down 4-3 in the eighth inning right now versus NC State. That is in Raleigh, and that's double ranked 16 for Coastal, 13 for NC State. But again, as it goes, it is very difficult to judge teams and programs this early in the season. I think we'll come back with another update maybe at the end of the month, see how these programs are working out, see who's having a good season. Very excited though to keep watching college baseball throughout the year as we get ready for March Madness, which
Yep.
is going to be great. Did you
Um.
watch IU Indy and Cleveland State, the one March Madness game last night?
Um. Yeah, I saw a little bit of it playing the game.
Cleveland State, nothing
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah. But going back to answer your question about the South Jersey pool, I think the obvious answer locally is LaSalle. I mean, like they have so much South Jersey talent, not this year, but coming over next year, especially Dante Bell, Bishop Eustace. I'm really interested to see how he does in his senior season. But I think the answer to maybe not a local team, Mississippi State. I mean, you mentioned Cooper Birdie, who just committed there after decommitting from Tennessee. But another guy, Jackson Logar, who was at
That's right.
Shawnee and transferred from James Madison to Mississippi State. I wouldn't be shocked if more South Jersey guys go down there. It seems like they have a pull in some way or another from up here.
Especially if Birdie's successful. And listen, it would be a very good litmus test to see how South Jersey baseball will fare in the recruiting world, especially in the NIL era and the transfer portal era, if the number 4 team in the country that could rise, especially with LSU losing in the midweek, they could have an even rockier non-conference schedule. If Mississippi State, a perennial top program in the SEC, can succeed with South Jersey talent, not only is Mississippi State going to start recruiting more guys out of the area, in the class of 2027, 2028, 2029, and so on and so forth, as the years go on, more SEC coaches are going to look at that because they're going to see Cooper Birdie or Jackson Logar or whoever could be pitching for the Bulldogs and say, all right, well, this kid's good. Where's he from? Oh, he's from South Jersey. Well, I never really looked there, and we're already seeing that start to spring a little bit with Alabama. They've got a couple of South Jersey talents on their team. John Young Jr. to name one out of Cherry Hill West, and a handful of other arms down in Tuscaloosa. But they've got a good team this year. They're not ranked right now, but they're going to compete in the SEC. With that top prospect, one of the top prospects in Justin LeBron, handful of other guys that have really made their mark, but. I think Chase Kroberger's still down there, the
Yep.
Morristown grad who
And Evan
almost
Taylor.
pelted you with a home run ball last year. But no, I mean, listen, Alex O'Dude at Arkansas, and Cooper Birdie was originally a Tennessee commit before flipping to Starkville to Mississippi State. I think that SEC coaches are finally starting to see the value of South Jersey baseball, and what I love about, and not to mention Jack Nichols, Tennessee. That's
Yep.
another one.
And Mac.
Lennon Mack down there, but he also committed to Rutgers originally.
Yeah.
He spent his freshman season there. I'm talking about straight out of high school because
Yep.
that's where your recruiting process really has its most flowers. And what I love about South Jersey baseball is that look at Jack Nichols, Group Two high school, Tennessee, rather Group Two Haddon Heights. Have you been to their field?
Yeah.
Well, you've played on that field. That's right, you have. Yes, um, they've got an all dirt infield, high mound, not the best conditions, but it's not really anything of their own fault. They probably don't have the resources to redo the field, and I can't harp on them too much because listen, they're playing good baseball. It is what it is, but an SEC school can still recruit you even with that. Um, you don't. I see this all the time in college basketball, or pardon, in high school basketball and in high school football, the notion that if you want to succeed, you have to go to one of these prep academies that puts athletics over academics. They can't say that, but I will say that the schools like IMG and the other, I don't know what the other, Oak Hill, or their school
Montverde Academy.
Montverde,
Yeah.
yeah. Cooper Flagg was not learning quantum physics at Montverde Academy.
No.
None of the athletes and listen, maybe they have legitimate educational backgrounds to back them up, but I don't think a lot of people are committing to IMG Academy because of an education. They are committing there because of the superb athletics and the programs that they have at a national level. So when we talk about what it means to succeed in an elite level, these kids are going to get scholarships and free rides for an education at a Division 1 Power 5 school while also still getting to attend the small town public school that all of us are still born and raised with here in South Jersey. I like the fact that even if you go to Gloucester Catholic, I've been in Gloucester Catholic. I've spent a lot of time in there as a preparation for our ice hockey season there. They still provide a very good education. It is not athletics first. Even a non-public school, we don't have those prep academies down here. The academies that are very obviously focused around athletics first. I very much like the fact that here in South Jersey, we live in an area where that kind of public school education turning still into positive recruiting value on the diamond is still very much a factor.
Agreed, I totally agree with you. I'm glad we don't have those prep schools now. Some of them are um, education first, but most of them we have some up north. I'm not going to name names, but there's definitely some that we're thinking of in the back of our minds where athletics is first on the docket. It's sad to see these kids need education still, but I'm glad to see Jack Nichols, who a small school right down the street from where we're at here, uh, getting an SEC school to look at him, and he's good, and I hope he has a good rest of his high school career.
Yeah, and listen, there may be a travel ball factor embedded in that
True.
where,
Yep.
the Tennessee coaches could have seen him at a showcase or at a tournament, whatever. But I would still rather have a player recruited out of a travel baseball environment than have him recruited out of a prep academy environment, where you're paying, I don't know, 50, 60, $70,000 to get what we would call an education. So, um, we had a lot to talk about, and we still have a lot to talk about. We are going to transition now into talking about the Cape Atlantic League. We talked about the BCSL in our last episode, which feels like eons ago, but it was only 3 weeks ago. We just had a lot of things come up, and we're going to talk mostly about teams in the American and National. We may touch up a little bit on the Cal United, but what we'll also say is that big thanks to our friend Will Morris of St. Augustine for alerting this to us, but as well as it just slipped off the back of my mind, um, the Cape Atlantic does realign divisions every year, kind of like the Shore Conference does. So we do have to take these divisions with a grain of salt. And for today, for the purpose of conciseness, we will not be doing divisional predictions like we did in the BCSL episode when we know that things are going to change. Teams are going to get moved up, teams are going to get moved down. If I had to guess, if we want to preface this before we go in, I think that just looking at the Cal standings now, Egg Harbor was 12 and 13 last year, and Millville was 9 and 13. what I could see happening is that they bump Millville and EHT down to the National, and Holy Spirit and Cedar Creek get moved up to the American. Now, Cedar Creek, we talked a little bit about them before the show. They were 16-8 last year, only gave up 96 runs during the entire season. That's the second best mark in the Cal. That was Absegami, who was number one. They gave up 90 runs, led by freshman Aiden Fazzino and senior Michael Harless, who's now at Division III Newman. But before we start talking about our first team, I think that's the one thing that I wanted to touch up on. Looking at the Cal standings, is that who you think is gonna move up and down?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, like their seasons last year were just okay, and it's a hard division to be in. Cedar Creek 16-8. We'll get to them in a little bit. Talk about how they've struggled after the regular season, but yeah, Millville and Egg Harbor. If they do switch, they don't have to switch anything.
That's true.
Yeah,
It's not required, but we're just going to see, what's going to happen, and we're going to see who is going to end up moving up and down. I do not know yet when the Cal divisions are going to be unveiled. Looking at some of the schedules now, it looks like Lower Cape May is probably going to stay the same because they're back to backs or versus, Absegami, Buna, Holy Spirit. Those are the same teams. Although I should say that I'm seeing Middle Township in this as well. So Middle Township could be getting moved up to the National. They went 13-9 last year, had an 11-1 record in the Cal United. But let's talk about the first team on the list, St. Augustine, the Hermits. Now St. Augustine 18-8 last year. Now it would be incredible for me to say this, but 8 losses for St. Augustine almost feels like too many. Because under the Mike Ney era, and of course before then under the Mike Bylone era, they have had so much success that, listen, 2022, Mike Bylone's final year, 27-2. It feels like when the standard is that high, 18-8 feels a little bit low, but they have been pushing year over year. Their biggest losses that they had Alex Bersani, and then they had Joe Peacock, who is a great outfielder, and then Joe Erase, who's now at Rutgers. He homered versus North. I want to say Western Carolina is who he homered against, the Catamounts. They had a 340 average last year. Their ERA was a little bit high for my liking. It was a 3.72, but and again, that doesn't even seem that high, but with how a lot of teams are in South Jersey, I mean, it ranks for, if you want to know, it ranks for 38th best in South Jersey. And there were several Cal teams that had better ERAs than them. Absegami was 2.77. Vineland was 2.97. Let's see who else is on the list higher than them. Cedar Creek was 3.28. Lower Cape May 3.57. But it's still, again, for St. Augustine, they had a very good year. But they want to do better than they did last year, which sounds crazy because they won their division. But when the standard is set that high, you do kind of have to shoot for the moon and hope that you can land somewhere in space.
yeah. St. Augustine, year in and year out, their goal to win a state championship. They did do that last year. They lost a heartbreaker to Red Bank Catholic in the South Jersey non-public A semifinal, but I think it's a down year. It's tough to say when you win 18 games and you win your division, but year in and year out, again, they want to be good. And this year, they still got a lot of talent on their team. They're deep. Penn State commit Alex Weingartner, two-way phenom, 2.18 ERA last year on the mound, and hit 397 at the plate with 6 homers. They're going to need Ethan Soupy to rebound on the mound this year with the partner Jamison Dobis and Brady Jackson, who hit well last year, 352. So St. Augustine, they're still going to be good. They're going to probably be at the top of that Cal American if they're still, the Cal American, sorry. But St. Augustine, year in and year out, they are the top team.
Yeah, Alex Weingartner, you mentioned Penn State commit. I would also mention Brady Jackson, who was kind of the right hand man to Joey Baseball, Joey Erase last year, committed to Old Dominion. He hit 352 last year, had 3 homers. St. Augustine had 19 home runs as a team last year.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it definitely is for South Jersey. I mean, the most was Cherokee, but looking at, again, I'm gonna pull up the. I'm sorry, it was Cherokee who had 28. St. Augustine was third. So top 5 was Northern Burlington with 36, Cherokee with 28, St. Augustine with 19, and then Shalleck 17, EHT 15. That's what made it so surprising that EHT had a 12-13 record, is that they had some of the best players in South Jersey that they had to offer. A lot of Division One, a lot of Power 5 commits, and then it ended up just kind of faltering out of their hands. but we'll get to them. We're going to go in divisional order from last year. So next team on the list is going to be Joe Smith's Mainland Mustangs.
Yeah, them last year, Mainland, Joe Smith, really good coach, coming over from Delsey and previously Williamstown. They went 17 and 10, 7 and 5 at the Cal American, uh, but they won the Diamond Classic over Haddonfield. It was
Exactly.
a great run. Lost to St. Augustine in the Cal tournament final, and then they got to the playoffs, and that's where things kind of went downhill. They lost to their rival Ocean City in the South Jersey Group 3 quarters, a 3-1 loss. Uh, they lost their top two pitchers. They graduated, Jake Logic and Finnegan Haynes. Those are two very good pitchers. They should be getting Jake Blum back, though. He was out last year, all of last year with an injury, so that should be a climb, even though they lost those top two arms. Will Hickman's good arm for them, and yeah, Mainland they're well coached, so I don't expect them to fall off too much, even with the departures. But in that Cal American, it's a really tough division. But Mainland, maybe they'll make another Diamond Classic run. We'll wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, this is the team that knocked Northern Burlington off in the Diamond as a 15 seed. They had a lot of success. And again, this is a 7-5 team. They took Del Barton to 10 innings. Back in early April, they were 4-5. They definitely had their struggles, but I think that it wasn't representative of how much they were good as a team. Because they were 20-6 2 years ago in Billy Kern's last year before he left. So, what does it say to Mainland that 17-10 is considered a down year? Again, when Billy Kern was there, 2023 they were only 14-14, and then 2021 they were 23-4. That was when Chase Petty was there. That was his senior year. We can only compare teams so far back, but for Joe Smith, first year head coach, I think that he reined in this Mainland team well. Listen, 3.03 average, 3.33 ERA, only 4 home runs across the entire season. One by Brady Arena, one by Colton Donahue. Finnegan Haynes hit one out of the yard, and then Christian Madamba. But what they all have in common is that besides Colton Donahue, they're all seniors. I think Colton Donahue's going to have a good season. He hit 258 last year. One thing that's going to be interesting, I think, as well with him is the stolen base threats that Mainland has to offer. They stole 53 bags last year, not incredibly high of a number, but not incredibly low of a number. They had a lot of guys they had a few guys that stuck out with that to me. Chase Kamak, which was a senior last year, he stole 16 bases, but Colton Donahue stole 17 last year. And I think that if he's going to be able to increase those numbers, especially at Mainland's field, where again, if you can have quick guys on those teams, what I'm trying to say is that when you go to Mainland Field, it can be very windy there, and the ball can definitely kick around a little bit. So if you can have a quick guy on the base, run a hit and run, get somebody out into the gap, it's obviously situational. But when we talk about Mainland, they're definitely going to be a team that is going to go toe to toe with St. Augustine last year, and Joe Smith only was in his first year at Mainland last year. Now that he's going to be in year two, he's going to be keeping some of his core and building a new core alongside it. His hands are going to be full, but I think that he's going to have a good year.
Agreed. Now he knows how these guys work. Your first year, 17 and 10, that's good in my opinion. But now he knows how his players act. He knows how his players play. He got used to the system there down in Mainland. So we'll see what happens, and I'm excited for those two division games and maybe even more in the Cal tournament against St. Augustine.
Third team on the list in the Cal American is the Hamilton Blue Devils. Went 14-10 last year, also 7-5 in the Cal American. So it was Mainland that was 7-5, along with Hamilton that was 7-5, and then Vineland and Millville were both 5-7, and then Ocean City and EHT were both 4-8. How about the parity in that division that no team in the Cal American had less than 4 divisional wins? I think that's pretty good.
They beat up on each other.
Yeah, exactly. But, you get a turn here, you get a turn there. This is another team that had, a first-year head coach. They had Greg Silvestri in 2024. He was there for a few years. Again, they had up and down years, but they were 18-9 when Silvestri left the program. They had Frank Lasasso took over. They had a 10-3 start. They were 10-4 by the end of April. And even though St. Augustine, they were some pretty lopsided losses, they beat EHT. They beat Vineland. They split versus Millville in the season series. And they picked up some good non-conference wins as well. They beat Cherry Hill West in Coaches versus Cancer. They beat Holy Spirit in the quarterfinal round of the Cal tournament. They had some good games, and they played San Augustine 3 times. They lost to them all 3 times, but I think that Hamilton's a team that when you're playing against the juggernauts like San Augustine and Mainland, it is hard to fit into anything other than a nice third place. But again, their hitting was not a problem. Above 300 as a team, but a 4.84 ERA is partially what held them back. There were a lot of pitchers that had an ERA over 4, over 5. Really, the guy holding down the fort was Dominic DiNucci at 17 innings with a 2.02 mark. He is actually the only pitcher to have a sub 3 ERA. The next guy behind him, which I'm hoping if he brings his numbers down, he's going to be really good. I got to see him in a little showcase last year. Trevor West, freshman, 4.42 ERA. Again, not a lot of strikeouts. He had 12 strikeouts. I would like to see him work on his control. He had 11 walks and 10 hit batters last year. I think that he's going to be the next guy that Frank Lasasso and Hamilton are going to look to next year, because in 25 innings, that is a heavy workload for a freshman, and I think that 4.42 as a freshman for ERA, it's not the best thing in the world, but it's not anything to complain about. I think that he's going to have a lot of good years ahead of him.
Yeah, Trevor West is going to be the leader of this pitching staff. They lost their top four arms innings wise. Those four combined for 97 of the 153 in the third innings. So these young guys are going to have to lead the team. I mean, like you mentioned, Hamilton started 10-3. They had a 7-game winning streak at one point, but then they lost 4 of their last 5, including the quarterfinal loss to Thompson River East, 9-0. They got shut out. But Hamilton, it's a tough division. I keep saying it because it's probably second or third best division in South Jersey, you could argue. So we'll see what the Blue Devils can do over there. Again, these young guys are going to have to be the top dogs and move forward with the program.
Absolutely. And again, we talk about their hitters. They've got a lot of younger guys, which I think that Hamilton is going to be. They're going to be one of those teams that's going to have a lot of high scoring games. And they had a lot of them this year. They won 10-8 over Cedar Creek. They lost 10-8 to Kingsway. And I'm sorry, that was 2024. Let me look at 2025 again. But 9-8 over EHT, 7-6 over Ocean City, 12-10 loss to Mainland, 13-10 loss to Rancocas Valley, and even in their wins, 17-5 over Cumberland, 12-4 over Vineland. My main point is that there's these kinds of teams in South Jersey baseball that they definitely have a certain archetype, and Hamilton is one where they're going to give up a decent amount of runs, but they're going to score a lot of runs as well. They've been very efficient on offense. I really I liked Cole Bagnell. He graduated, but looking at this roster now, I'm seeing a decent amount of players who I think can make an impact. Cooper Mull drew 22 walks last year. That is a crazy good number. I do wonder how they're going to replace Cole Bagnell, but the only way to find out is to start playing some games and start having some practices. So, um, I think that again, Hamilton, it's a weird case. Over 300 average, but an under, rather a near 5 ERA is a little concerning. So I think that as this team moves on and as they go into 2026, I think that they're going to have their work cut out for them, because they were top 20 in batting average, but they were near bottom 20 in ERA. So it's certainly it's a what's the word? It's a slippery slope. But as this team goes further in, I think that the Cape Atlantic American, if they stay there, assuming they will stay there, because they were 7-5, they were
Yep.
14-10. I think that they're just going to have their work cut out for them.
Agreed, and we'll see how they do. Like you said, they got to start playing games, and then we can see how their season's going to trend. And I wish the best to every team we
Of
talk
course.
about. Hopefully, they trend in the right direction. But in that tough division, you never know what's going to happen.
Next up, we've got Kyle Jones and the Vineland Fighting Clan. They were 16-11 last year. Listen, I think Kyle Jones has done a very good job, especially after winning 11 games last year. That was definitely a down season from the 2023 season that they had, where they were on top of the world, 18-9, fizzled out at the end of the year, lost in the second round of the playoffs. But this Vineland team has been very good in recent years. They had 20 wins in 2022. They had 18 in 2023, and Kyle Jones took over the program in 2020, so this is going to be year 6 for him now. 16-11, despite the 5-7 record in the Cal American, is still something good. And they were a 6 seed that made it to the semifinals and held their own versus Eastern. Only lost by 3 runs in that game to a powerhouse Eastern team. They beat Southern at home 8-2. Then they beat GCIT at home. Not a lot of 6 seeds can say that they get 2 home games, but they did.
Well,
And
that one against GCIT was played at Rutgers Camden because of
oh,
the
that's
rain.
right. Yeah. Still, they
Yeah, they were.
listen, it was 6 versus 14. That is true. Um, but talking about what Vineland has been able to accomplish, we saw them in their opening day game last year versus Cumberland. They won that game 5-1. That's what I was really impressed with Vineland. And they're one guy that I want to highlight, Mario Toro. Absolute star on the mound. 2.26 ERA last year, nearly 50 innings pitched, and the team as a whole pitched 181 innings. So, he was up there with Kyle Lamontier, who's now at Rowan, and then Xavier Etheridge, who was also a fantastic pitcher that I got to see as well. Um, Another two-way. Even for a Group 4, Vineland is the largest high school by capacity in South Jersey. There's a lot of two-ways on this team with Xavier Etheridge, Mario Toro. You could say as well, Jake Garton was at first base for a lot last year. So, I think that this Vineland team is going to be one that will certainly succeed. And I honestly think that they could leapfrog Hamilton in what they're capable of doing because they have a lot more younger guys. What I love about Vineland as well is their depth. They had, if I'm counting right, they had over 25 players record an at bat for them last year. They've had guys called up from JV at the middle of the season. This team is very tapped into their depth, and they've had guys who have been productive even if they haven't played a full season. Mario Capizola, sophomore, 300 average, only had 10 at bats last year. I'm looking at Carlos Gill, a junior, 286 average, only 28 at bats. But then the actual starters also did their job. Carlos Santiago had a great season with 13 walks, 22 hits in 81 at bats, and then you've got Kyle Lamontier, who graduated. He's at Rowan, but Xavier Etheridge, we were just talking about him. How many guys can have a near 300 batting average and a sub-2 ERA, sub-3 ERA?
Not many.
Not a lot of guys,
Yeah.
especially at a Group 4 school. Etheridge and Toro are going to be their guys, and Vineland is very lucky that they had 4 star pitchers last year in Toro, Etheridge, Lamontier, and then Seth Soupy, because Lamontier and Soupy are gone, and now picking up the pieces is going to be Etheridge and Toro. But my point is that Vineland is going to be very successful next year. That's my pick.
Agreed. They're sneaky good in a way. I mean, like last year, 6 seed, they go to the semifinals and they give all they have against Eastern. And you're mentioning these guys they lost. It doesn't really matter for Vineland. They're really deep, as you mentioned. And just to highlight some of their wins last year: Ocean City, St. Augustine, Egg Harbor twice, Lenape, and Pittman. Vineland is going to have a good year, I think, because of how deep they are, and it's going to be exciting to watch. And hopefully, we get to cover them.
Absolutely. One thing that I will mention, and I will definitely follow up on this, but I am planning an episode either next week or in 2 weeks where we're going to devote most of the episode to unveiling the DWB baseball schedule. So last year, over in that corner of the room, Jake Clark was here, and we did the DWB selection show. Most of the selections are done right now,
Yeah.
but I just can't talk about it all that much. I mean, I could, but I don't want to. That ruins
Yeah.
the fun.
I mean, like me and you know, that's the
Yeah,
best thing.
me and about 15 other people who are in our, media circles know what the schedule is, but it changes. And also, we want to we want to surprise people. So we don't know if it'll be next week. We don't know if it'll be in 2 weeks, but we are running out of time because the first game's on March 23rd. So we only have, if I'm looking at my calendar, today is Tuesday. We only have 2 weeks to get it done. So
Well, if it ever stops snowing, maybe we'll get more episodes.
well, we either do it next week or in 2 weeks. But my point is that is something that I'm going to plan to do. We're going to do our regular schedule unveil anyway. But my point is that we may do the schedule unveil and then we're going to do the episode where we dissect a lot of the games. Talk about why we picked this or why we think that this is going to be a good game, because there's going to be some great games on this schedule. We right now have over 40 high school baseball games scheduled for South Jersey. So there's your hint. But yeah, Vineland going to be a great team next year. Let's talk about Millville. Let's talk about the Millville Thunderbolts. Listen, I got to see them on opening day last year. Valdra Forbes, first year head coach. Again, there's a lot of first year head coaches in the Cal American this year. Talked about Forbes. We talked about Frank Lasasso out of Hamilton, and then Joe Smith out of Mainland. So 9-13, they had the worst winning percentage of teams in the Cal American, but they still were able to riff off either really good matchups or at least very competitive matchups. They split the season series versus Mainland, won the second game on the road. They split the series versus Ocean City, split versus Vineland as well, and their only sweeps in the Cal American were St. Augustine. They also split versus Egg Harbor. So for Millville, they were 5-7 in the Cal, but they split versus some of the best teams. So Ocean City they won by 3. So did they. So did they versus Pennsville. But Millville is also a team that's very ambitious with their non-conference schedule. Because they're in Cumberland County, they do have to travel a little bit far, but they played Toms River East on the road. They played Delsea, the Tri-County team. They opened their season with Pittman. They played Haddon Heights as well and Pennsville. So even though Millville did not get a very strong hand, they were shut out as a 9 seed in South Jersey Group 4. I think that this is a Millville team that's going to be pretty successful. They did graduate Brady Middlecoff, their top pitcher from last year, but they are bringing back Garrett Shapiro, who had slightly more innings and pretty comparable numbers, 30 Ks, 2.73 ERA for a Millville team that hit 276 and had a 4.40 mark.
Yeah, we had Millville on opening day, as you mentioned, and I thought they were going to be really good. Brady Middlecoff had a really good game that day. It just didn't work out. They went 9-13. That's not too hot, but first year head coach again, like most of the teams we have mentioned tonight. So we'll see how they do. Garrett Shapiro, he should be good again, 2.73 ERA, but pitching is a top concern for the Thunderbolts. Offensively, Cole Moharan, he hit 500 last year. He slugged 500. However, all his hits were singles. So maybe they'll get some pop. Maybe they have some freshmen coming in. That's the thing we don't know with these teams. We don't know who's coming in. Maybe they have a couple transfers that have to sit out due to the NJSIAA rule. But we'll see. Millville, and for them to only get swept last year that one time against the top
St.
dog,
Augustine, yeah,
top dog in
the
St.
team that
Augustine,
went 10-2 in the Cal American,
that's
yeah,
something else.
it absolutely is. We're going to talk about as well the Ocean City Red Raiders, 14-12 last year under Andrew Bristol. Again, another team that, with how good they've been in recent years, the season that they had last year did feel like a bit of a step back. Andrew Bristol's been here for a while, but when we talk post-COVID, they were 19-9 in 2021. They were 18-8 in 2024. They definitely did not have a hot start to the year. They were 5-9 near the end of April, but they ripped off some big wins. They beat Southern Regional, they beat Pennsville, they beat Williamstown. They also played Shalleck, lost to them. They lost to Cherokee 10-5. Again, another team that is not afraid to schedule very tough and ambitious scheduling. But again, this is another team that is certainly led by a little bit of both. A little bit of hitting, a little bit of pitching. They had Evan Taylor, who graduated this year, hit 357 with 7 homers for Ocean City. I can't imagine. I have not been to Ocean City's ballpark, but I can't imagine it's very hitter friendly with all that beach wind coming in. You're going to have a lot of heavy gusts off the ocean, and unless the field is facing the other way and they're getting all those gusts to point out, I'd have to look at it.
I've been there. I can't remember which way it's pointing. I mean, like it's not short, and yeah, the wind's definitely got to play a factor there.
Yeah, so if it's blowing out, then 7 home runs definitely plays a role. But he is at Alabama; he's doing very well over there. But 13 home runs for the squad last year. Most of them were by seniors. But the one guy I wanna highlight, Preston Pahang. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Didn't do that much at the plate, but as a freshman, 29 Ks, 1.59 ERA, and pitched versus some of the best that they have to offer. He came out of the bullpen mostly. He had one 5-inning start versus Vineland, a game that they lost 2-1, but he didn't give up any runs in that appearance. He's going to be, listen, we don't talk about relievers a lot because there aren't a lot of guys who can say that they are bona fide relief pitchers in South Jersey baseball because everybody wants to be a starter, right? We a lot of guys either want to be a starter or a closer. Not everybody, and it's very rare to see pitchers want to do the dirty work. So, Preston Pahang as a sophomore or as a freshman coming into his sophomore year seems to be having a lot of success, and then Cameron Street as well, holding down the fort, 35 innings, 4.4 ERA.
Yeah, those are the two guys on the mound I want to highlight. They should be a good 1-2 punch, and both had decent years last year. Street's ERA was a little high for my liking, 4.40, but he pitched 35 innings. It's a lot of innings. The question I have is the offense. I mean, like they have a lot of guys with talent and experience, but can they step up in the absence of a very good 2025 graduated class?
Yeah, I don't know. Again, that's going to be something that's really going to define their season. I think they've got the pitching under control. Cameron Street, a Division I commit, he recently, or actually, I thought it was more recently, but he only signed recently. 6'6", 205, committed to NJIT up in North Jersey. So he'll be headed to the Highlanders in 2027. I don't know why I blanked on the name, but well, I mean it's a mid-major up there. I haven't gotten to see NJIT in a while, so no, I think that Ocean City, I think they're going to play pretty well again. It's very difficult to say that X or Y team in the Cal American is not going to do well. I can't really say it because
No.
there's just so many teams that are that talented, and we also don't know who's getting bumped out, who's going to go to the Cal National. So to close out our Cal American discussion, we have the Egg Harbor Eagles, who again are another team that had a great season in 2024 in the Cal American, no less. Brian Carmichael led the Eagles to a 20-9 season in 2024. They were 14-12 in 2023, 21-7 in 2022, but another team that really seems to have a lot of their work cut out for them. They were at the bottom of the Cal American with a sub 500 record and a 4-8 divisional record, but they did win a playoff game on the road. They beat number 7 Central Regional on the road, and then they fell to Eastern 4-3. This is an EHT team that has some of the best talent in South Jersey, and we talked about it before we went on the air. We were really surprised that with all the talent that EHT had, that they didn't have it all together in 2025.
Yeah, Jacob Cagna they had. He was one of the most underrated players in South Jersey. I'm just gonna go out and say I don't think he didn't get as much respect as he deserved.
I mean, he's a 500 hitter,
Yeah.
you know?
In a very talented division at that. But for Egg Harbor last year, they could never stay consistent. It was up and down all year, and they ended up finishing under 500. But for this year, Chip Clooney, someone to watch on the mound, 3.41 ERA last year. But some other guys are going to have to step up. Elijah Casey, he's back this year. He hit 311 last year, slugged 378. There are some holes in this team. It's not something that you can hide, but they're really well coached under Brian Carmichael.
Well, I'll tell you, Jake Cagna, he's now at Canisius. Canisius?
Canisius, I think.
Okay.
Canisius, yeah.
I apologize if I butchered that pronunciation, but the Griffins up over in Buffalo, they are in the MAAC. So again, mid-major baseball, Division One. If you want to see Jacob Cagna, they're playing the Delaware Blue Hens this weekend. So over in Newark, Delaware. So you may get a chance to see Jacob Cagna with Egg Harbor if you end up seeing them. But my point is that when we talk about the Cape Atlantic American. We've said it like a broken record, and we're finally going to put the record to rest because we're going to talk about the Cal National next. But again, tough division. If you're hitting well on a team that did not win this division, yeah, I'd say you're a little bit underrated. But do I say that Egg Harbor as a team, as a program, is underrated? I wouldn't say that because
Yeah.
you do have guys like Cam Flukie. We just talked about him. We've been talking about him nonstop for the duration of this podcast from episode 1 to today because he's probably going to be one of the top picks in the MLB draft. And again, they've had some excellent years before then. Cagna was a great two-way guy. He had a 3.69 career ERA, which again wasn't anything insane, but had 100 hits, 100 RBIs, 15 home runs as a shortstop as well. That's a very skillful position to be somebody that's power hitter, got a lot of pop, but a 2.93 average on the team and then a 5.06 ERA. It's the same thing that Hamilton had an issue with, that they were excellent at the plate, but then struggled on the mound. And I think that the assessment that we've seen of teams in South Jersey in the Cape Atlantic have shown that yeah, it definitely is going to be a year of pitching. If you don't have your pitchers ducks in a row, then you might not have all that success in 2026 or beyond.
Yeah, you gotta have your pitching staff ready to go coming into this season in the Cal American. A lot of these teams we've already talked about, they had high ERAs like you mentioned. So to get those down, the Cal American, if they get those ERAs down, it's going to be even better division.
Absolutely. Let's slide over to the Cal National. We're going to talk about first the division winner out of that division, the Cedar Creek Pirates. Again, Group 2 team. The Cal is aligned in such a way that most of the teams that we just talked about are Group 3 and 4. I mean, Vineland, Millville, Egg Harbor are all fours. Mainland, Hamilton, and OC are all Group 3s, and then obviously St. Augustine non-public A. But Cedar Creek, you start to get into schools that are considered smaller. Buna is a Group 1. Absegami is a Group. Actually, they'd be considered Group 3 as well. I think. I don't know if
Who's
they're
that?
Group 2. Absegami. I
Group
don't.
Group 3, I think. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I know they're Group 3 in basketball, but sometimes numbers change for baseball. But then you got Lower Cape May, Group 2, Oak Crest, a Group 2, sometimes a Group 1 in some sports, and then ACIT, a Group 4. But let's talk about Cedar Creek to start. 16-8 under Ryan Flannery last year. They've had a lot of good arms come out of Cedar Creek lately. You know, Christian Coppola graduated from there a few years ago. He went to Rutgers. Now he was at Arizona. Now he's at St. Joe's in Philadelphia. But solid numbers across the board. 3.13 average, 3.28 ERA. They had a sophomore last year who pitched 34 innings, Kyle Vanneman, 2.22 ERA. Again, the walks were a little high, but I mean, 15 walks in 35 innings isn't that shabby at
No.
all. 35 Ks again for Vanneman, who also hit 235 at the plate. So I think that they're definitely going to have a season that will be pretty similar to what I think Cedar Creek's able to accomplish.
Agreed. I mean, like they have Kyle Vanneman back, but Matt Vanneman graduated. He pitched 43 and a third innings last year. That's a lot. So they're going to have to try to fill that role. I'm not worried about their pitching or offense. Their offense has got Richie Gonzalez, Jacob Budd, Aiden Chambers, J.J. Watkins, Colin Weeks, just to mention a few names. But the problem for Cedar Creek, I think, is that they've had these good regular season division champions last year, but the last three seasons, 2023 they lost to Seneca in the second round, Lower Cape May in 2024, and last year were upset in the first round against Manchester. It's make it or break it this year for Cedar Creek, and we'll see what happens.
I think there's a few teams that we can put under that umbrella. I think Rancocas Valley in the Olympics, one of them.
Agreed.
I think that there's a little bit of tension sometimes between these teams where you have months to prepare for the biggest games of the season, and if you don't have it, what did Kevin Minnick say about basketball? If you don't have it, you're going to be turning in your
Yep,
uniform.
great quote.
It applies to the diamond as well, especially in a baseball environment that has a lot of upsets. And when we talk about what these teams are capable of, yes, Cedar Creek's a very talented team. If we see them in March or April or May, we're going to talk about how good they are. But do you have what it takes in the last week of May when you're slotted up against a team like Manchester that's going to travel maybe an hour down the Jersey Shore to get to you? If you don't have what it takes, again, Cedar Creek was the number 3 seed. I would excuse it if it was a 7, an 8, or a 9. But when you are a number 3 seed, there's a lot of eyes on you. Your expectation is to win. And, Cedar Creek's one of those teams that I'm a little bit worried about. Are they going to be able to hold up with all of the playoff shortcomings that they've had? Because they lost in the first round of the Diamond. They lost in the semis of the Cal tournament, but they at least got a win in that over Middle. They were the number 3 seed in that as well. So, again,
And
new
group
new seasons mean new horizons for everybody.
and Group Two's getting better each and every year. Haddonfield, Collingswood, Had Heights, just to mention a few. So we'll see what happens. But Cedar Creek, this is do or die. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
I think that they should be at least aware of not missing your window,
yeah, I think
because
they are.
Haddonfield's only going to get better. Collingswood is only going to get better. The other teams that we talked about in that bracket as well. I think Overbrook's going to have a decent season this year with their senior class, and the rest of that bracket as well. There's a lot of great teams in Group 2. That entire group I would call underrated.
Yeah,
for
it's
what it's
anybody's
worth.
field every
It's
year.
anybody's field. Haddonfield obviously was a team that broke out, but not a lot of people had them not seriously contending. But I don't think if you asked me in March of 2025 who was going to win Group Two, I probably wouldn't have given you a straight answer because
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known.
You might as well flip a coin.
Yeah, exactly. Or flip 5 coins at the same time, see who comes down with it. Because that final was 1v6. Collingswood
Yeah.
ended up making it up there. So let's talk about Holy Spirit. Down in Absecon, second-year head coach Mike Edwards, the former, well, he had his first year last year, took over for Steve Norman. We last saw Holy Spirit on DWB in 2024. They lost 3-1 to Bishop Eustace. Of course, Bishop Eustace 2024 had an excellent season that year, made it to the South Jersey non-public B final. But talking about Holy Spirit, he takes over for Steve Norman, goes from 9-15 last year to 14-10, 10-2 in the Cal National. Started off the year 10-2. They were 13-3 going into the month of May. They definitely have a lot of talent on their team. I think that, again, they're one of those teams that, as a non-public in non-public B, they are specifically hard to judge because you have Gloucester Catholic and you have Bishop Eustace. We talked about Doan Academy last episode.
Yep.
We said, how difficult is it going to be for anybody other than GC or Eustace to make a third team, to make a third powerhouse in non-public B if the final every year is going to be GC and Eustace? So Holy Spirit is another good candidate to take that spot, considering that for several years now they have slid into the number 3 seed. Um, but as it goes, they have the numbers for it: 335 average, which is pretty high, and then a sub 4 ERA as well. And I talk about I talk ad nauseum about these team statistics because baseball is a team sport. They were fifth in batting average, in team batting average last year, and second in the Cal. The top five were Northern Burlington, Shalleck, Palmyra, St. Augustine, and Holy Spirit. 4 out of those 5 teams, very serious contenders last year. Northern Burlington obviously won a state title. Shalleck won a sectional title. St. Augustine obviously did well. And then Holy Spirit hung in there as well. So just as much as a low team ERA means you're going to be successful, a high batting average just below Holy Spirit, Eastern, Cherokee, Collingswood, Gloucester Catholic, all 4 superpowers in South Jersey. So a high batting average means that Holy Spirit under Mike Edwards is going to have a great season, I think. I think that honestly, if they stay in the Cal National, which I'm not sure if they do. We talked to Will Morris of St. Augustine. We're not sure who is moving up yet, and we're not sure when those alignments will be officially revealed. But if they stay in the Cal National, I think they're my pick to win the division.
Agreed. Holy Spirit, these non-public teams are a little tough to judge because you don't know who's coming in, freshman-wise or even transfer-wise. But they were solid last year, 10-2 in the division. But again, in non-public B, who is going to beat the powerhouses of Gloucester Catholic and Eustis? That's the question. And right now, I think it's between Holy Spirit and Doane Academy.
Absolutely. And, if you want to talk about non-public B, the Ranney school's in there for a conversation. There's going to be some other schools that I think are going to make a break for it, but I definitely think that they're going to be a team that will have a lot to like in 2026. Moving down a little bit further down the shore, we'll talk about the Absegami Braves led. They were 12-9. Junior Mejia, great coach for them. We got to see them last year in a win over Buna, 7-1, but another team that started off strong, tapered off a little bit towards the end. They were 7-2 when we saw them, picking up a 4-0 start and then a loss to OC, a loss to Cedar Creek. They ended up splitting that series. They were swept by Holy Spirit, but listen, they held their own in the Diamond. They lost to Delsey by 1 run. And in baseball, the teams that you lose to by 1 or 2 runs still means that you had a good performance. So I think that like in football, if you lose to a team by 1 touchdown, they're going to be like, oh, well, you lost to them by 1 touchdown. In baseball, there's more nuance to it. It's not black and white. So Absegami, though, 260 average, ERA of 2.77, which is admittedly a very good mark for that Cal division. They were led by Michael Harless, who is now at Newman over in PA. I said it's in Philadelphia. It's not technically in Philadelphia. It's in Aston, Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia suburbs,
It's
if
like
you will.
Villanova.
Exactly. Exactly. I don't know if Villanova would be considered a Big Five school, but I don't know who else you can't replace it with anybody. So, um, no, but for Absegami, they actually had a top 15 ERA on the team. And out of Cal schools, the only schools better than them, actually, were they had the lowest ERA of any school in the Cape Atlantic. Behind them was Doan, Shawnee, Paul Six, and Collingswood. They're 15th. And then ahead of them, Seneca with 2.75, Haddonfield with 2.59, Bishop Eustace 2.48, and then Kingsway 2.47. And the best, Gloucester Catholic, a 1 ERA, 1.00. Can't believe that. But when we talk about the Tri County, that's going to be a great point of discussion. But I am concerned about Absegami.
Yeah.
Getting back to the point, last year, first round playoff loss. They were on the road. They were the number 12 seed, but they lost 1-0 to Toms River South, and they had a decent amount of seniors graduating. I really liked Jack Scazafava at first base. I thought that he was a great defender, had a lot of great range over there. And then they had Joaquin Velez, who was a pretty good hitter as well. Again, another great defender. This was an Absegami team that was pretty much built on defense. They swiped 78 bags. Those two of their leaders are gone with that. Nick Gargione had 19 last year and a 409 hitter. He's graduated. And then as well, you have Adrian Rosario, who is 15. He's coming back. That's probably the best guy that they have coming back, which what I would say would be the outfielder and the two-way, if you will, Adrian Rosario.
Yeah, he hit 317 last year, stole 15 bases. But like you said, I'm concerned about this Absegami team. Michael Harless threw 50 innings last year, and the only other pitcher that pitched well was Aiden Fazzino, the freshman, 21 innings, 1.33 ERA. He's going to see a lot of more work this season without Harless there. And really, Adrian Rosario and Aiden Acosta, 237 average, 15 stolen bases as well in 2025. That's really their only offense. And this Cal National, like we mentioned, the two teams above them, as we talked about, Holy Spirit and Cedar Creek, Absegami is going to have to beat them to go up in the division.
Absolutely. And we were talking about before, if Cedar Creek and Holy Spirit move up into the Cal American, and let's say, for sake of argument, Millville and EHT move down, then I think the instant contenders in the Cal National become Millville and Egg Harbor.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, like I said, it's dependent on if Holy Spirit stays, because I think if Holy Spirit stays in the Cal National, they win that division. If Cedar Creek and Holy Spirit both stay, then I think that it could be a lot more even, because Cedar Creek did go 11-1, and when they went head to head versus Holy Spirit, they beat them 11-1, 6-2. Mercy ruling the team that's one notch below you in the division is a tall order, so I give them props for that. But again, I think that their pitching is going to be something where I think that they may come out of the gate a little bit slower, but I think that otherwise, I think that they may have a little bit of a turnaround season. Hopefully, though, they turned it around and they finished strong in 2026. But again, when Absegami was at like the peak of their powers, they had like Matt Johansson on the team. I remember him as like the guy for Absegami. Hit 404 in his senior year in 2024, and now is at, I believe, still Penn State Abington. I was surprised he wasn't recruited higher because of how good he is. But as we go about it, you know, as we get into the final four teams we're going to talk about today, um, Absegami is one of those teams that could definitely take a hit if the teams below them get better or if the teams above them get better. I think that they may get a little bit left out to dry. Hopefully that's not the case, but let's see what happens. Buna Chiefs, got to see them a handful of times last year, 14-12. Scored 211 runs last year, which is good enough for third in the division. Funny enough, Absegami and Lower Cape May both scored 139 runs. Buna scored 80 more than them. Now, to be fair, they played a good mix of Cal National and Cal United teams. They didn't play that many teams up in the Cal American. Teams like Cedar Creek and Holy Spirit, they really punched up to their division. I think that, honestly, Buna punched a little bit down. But again, Buna, as it is right now, still coming back from that famous 2023 season when Tom Carney was the head coach. And they beat my Audubon Green Wave in the sectional final. But listen, Tom Carney leaves, you go to Dan Carignato, and because of how Buna was, they were kind of stuck in 2024 because they had a new head coach. Everybody was new because the fifth year seniors had left or had graduated, and the and then they can't move them out of the American because the Cape Atlantic League, those people are not going to say that you get to move down a division because all of your guys graduated.
Yep.
They're going directly off of the results of last year. So the result is an 8-19 season and 0-12. They did not win a single divisional game in 2024. But in Carignato's second season, they do get moved down, and it does them a favor. They go to the 9 seed in Group 1. They beat Palmyra by 8 runs, and they only lost to Audubon by 4 in the quarterfinal round. So they played, they played some good teams. Um, and again, I think that how they played, the one team that was like a superstar team last year that they lost to was Shalleck, and they got run ruled by them. I don't know. The one thing I would encourage Buna to do is schedule up a little bit more. And I would say that it's probably in their best interest to play some Cal American teams because think about it in the sense of we cover Woodbury boys basketball, Mark DeRugeris. To make that point, there's a lot of guys that don't understand why Woodbury plays Plainfield, Camden, East St. Louis out of Illinois, all the other ones, the Patrick School, St. Augustine, Lenape, pardon. I could go on. But if you're Woodbury, look at what they did. They had a losing record and they still made it to the 7 seed in South Jersey Group 1. So, results aside, the fact that they lost most of those games, when you talk about what it means to schedule a tough schedule, it got them the number 7 seed. So, it's going to help them in the long run. And I think that if Buna does the same thing, and if a lot of teams do the same thing on the baseball side, then they'll be okay. Going to the stat side, 293 average, 4.88 ERA. The best pitchers that they had Elwood Taylor, a freshman, 1.62 ERA, and then they had the senior Dylan O'Connell, who had a 2.62 ERA, also hit 389 at the plate. That's going to be probably their biggest loss. I really do like Aiden Vi behind the plate. His average was only 214, but he's an excellent framer. He's somebody that can really draw a lot of strikes into the zone, especially for a team that might not have the same stability on the hill. So I think that, as we go in, you got Richie Wilson. He's a little bit of a power bat. He doesn't hit the ball out of the yard, but he slashes the ball. He really gets into it, gets a lot of high velo base hits, and a mix of seniors, mix of underclassmen. Buna is going to be one of those teams that I'm going to have to wait and see how they'll do this year.
Agreed. But going back to one of your other points, in my opinion, the only way to get better, or not the only way, one of the easiest ways to get better and improve as a team is play good competition. It's going to make you better even if you lose. I don't care if you get blown out, you get mercy ruled in baseball or whatever. It's going to make you better. Then you know where your team actually is, and then you can learn, okay, we can schedule this for next year. But going back to the stat side, Elwood Taylor, as you mentioned, he's going to be their top arm. He's going to see a lot more innings, only 21 and 2/3 last year. Some offense, Richie Wilson, I'm interested to see. He hit 351 last year, slugged 429, and stole 16 bases. And then Javion Alexander as well.
Yeah, Javon Alexander.
Javon,
I don't know if I'm saying that right either, but he is amazing. I really like his speed. He's got some blazing quick abilities. And again, Buna's a little bit like Absegami, where they've got some great defenders. Their numbers may not stick out, but because the website doesn't track defensive stats, you just kind of have to take his or my word for it. So let's slide down to the lowest point in South Jersey, and they say it for a reason. It is Lower Cape May. On the way to Cape May. You ever heard that song from the 50s?
No.
You've never
You
heard
want to sing it for us?
No, I'm not going to sing the whole song. There's a reason why I'm a broadcaster and not a singer, but no, there's a song from the 50s called On the Way to Cape May. But it's just like the Oh Those Wildwood Days. You hear it every like 15 minutes on the Wildwood Boardwalk when they remind you not to, smoke on the boardwalk. It's their song. We just don't have a song for the rest of the places in South Jersey. Lower Cape May. I cannot wait to go down to Cape May. I can't wait for this weather to get warmer, and then I get to have Uncle Bill's pancakes. But Maybe I'll have to tie that in. If Lower Cape May invites me to a game, I will gladly show up early and have some Uncle Bill's pancakes. But a team that was 5-14 after the last week of May ripped off six straight wins to close out the regular season, and then gets lined up with Barnegat, number 9 seed in. Rather, they were the number 9 seed in Group Two. They won that game, shut out by Haddonfield in the second round. This is a Lower Cape May team led by Ryan Slaney, who definitely um, had again some interesting years behind them. They were 16-12 last year. They were 15-8 in 2023. It feels like they've been on a very slow downswing, but again, they had a point in mid-April where they lost 8 straight games. That is not easy to come back from. And then closing the season on a 6-game winning streak, it's been a season of high and lows for Lower Cape May.
Yeah, it was a down year for them compared to previous seasons. In 2024, they went to the South Jersey Group 2 semis. They ended up losing to the eventual sectional champions in Seneca, but they graduated their top two arms. And Ty Heacock, he's back. He's going to have to lead the staff. 2.49 ERA, 21 Ks last year. But Lower Cape May, you got to improve from here. I mean, like, you cannot lose 8 straight games. But at least they won six after that, six in a row after that, and did get a playoff win, and then ran into the Power Dogs of Haddonfield.
Absolutely, it's gonna be a hard hill to climb for Lower Cape May. I think that listen, with how much this competition has been, when we get into like the Colonial next week or the Olympic, we're going to be able to say definitively, okay, these teams are going to be competitive, and these teams are probably not. When you get into conferences like that, it's a lot easier to judge how you're supposed to play. But with how much parity is in the Cal American, we talked about no team being worse than 4 divisional wins in the Cal American. That is not exactly the case here in the National. You do have 2 3-9s at Lower Cape May and Oakcrest, and an ACIT went 1-11 in divisional play. I think that in the Cal National, it is a little bit less. It is a little bit more cut and dry. But at the same time, you still have a Lower Cape May team that's 12-15, and as we mentioned, we still think they're going to be successful. So we have 2 more teams we are going to cover. We've got the Oakcrest Falcons and then the ACIT Redhawks, and then that is going to close out our coverage. I should say, to preface this, we're going to try to go one per week to close out the off season. I don't know if I can purely commit to going to 2 episodes a week in the regular season. We'll talk about it once these cameras stop rolling, but it's gonna be difficult. Obviously we have a strong schedule ahead of us, but we may have to make up for that by doing an episode or two virtually, or pre-recording an episode early in the day and then bringing it out for everyone to see later. That's what we did for the last episode. We recorded it at, like, I want to say 1 or 2 p.m., and then we brought it out at 5. So this is being taped live, but what we've got coming up, again, as the baseball season ramps up, this is one of my busiest times of the year. Baseball season is always going to be busy. The rest of March should be okay, but once we get into April and May, we may have to take a couple of different measures to bring you the South Jersey Starting Nine podcast. But I do appreciate the podcast. I do appreciate the love that we've gotten so far. We have gotten a lot of positive comments from the South Jersey coaching community and the players as well. They really seem to appreciate the coverage. So I send that appreciation back
Yes,
to
thank
you.
Yep.
As we try to get more episodes out here. But let's talk about the Oakcrest Falcons. 7-17 last year. Jesse Milza, head coach over there, went 13-12 2 years ago, and Milza is now going to be in his 3rd season. This is a team that started off 0-6 and then 1-9 and had a really good span in mid-April. They swept Lower Cape May. They had some in-conference United wins, but as Lower Cape May lost to Haddonfield in the quarterfinal round, this is who Haddonfield beat in the first round. They faced back-to-back Cape Atlantic teams. This is an Oakcrest team that was, again, 3-9. 2 of those wins came versus Lower Cape May. The third came against ACIT, who they split the series against. But a 260 average team, 5.59 ERA. I'm sorry, 5.59 ERA. But what intrigues me about them is their ability to get on base. Think about Billy Bean in Moneyball, played by Brad Pitt, because he gets on base. They had 99 walks last year. 40 of them were split across 2 sophomores. Tim Grayson 20 walks, 361 average, and then Colton Garina, another sophomore, also with 20 walks and then 19 stolen bases. When you talk about teams that are of this caliber, we don't talk a lot about the pop. We don't talk a lot about the home runs because it is a phenomenon where teams have gone an entire season without hitting a home run. We didn't mention it, but Buna is one of them. They went an entire season in 2025 without hitting a home run. It's more common than you think. I think something like 20% of the teams in South Jersey that played baseball last year did not have a player that hit a home run. So, how else do you generate offense? Well, when you don't have a lot of extra base hits, singles, and walks. And that's exactly what Oakcrest took advantage of. Again, 99 walks on at the plate. But where I'm concerned is that on the pitcher side, they seem to give up those same amount of walks. They gave up 121 walks, but Colton Garina, as we mentioned, he might be the two-way star for this Falcons team.
Yeah, Oakcrest is a work in progress. I mean, like last year wasn't their best. I mean, like at least they had 3 wins in the division. They didn't go defeated, but they started the season 0-6, as you mentioned, and they had an okay stretch. But the problem, they lost 7 of their last 8, and to Haddonfield eventually in the playoffs. The pitching is a top concern. They walk a lot of guys, but Robert Gates and Colton Garina are going to have to lead the staff again, and at least they're getting on base. Just I would like to see a little bit more stolen bases, maybe.
Had 33 of them last year, I'm pretty sure.
To generate some offense there. But Oakcrest, hopefully they go up this year, and if they get 8 wins, then that's an improvement from last year.
Absolutely. We talk about momentum a lot in baseball, and two perfect examples of it are Lower Cape May and Oakcrest. Lower Cape May has an 8-game losing streak in mid-April. They turn it around. They win the Caper Classic, their home tournament. They beat Middle Township and they beat Wildwood. Then they win 6 games, or they won 6 games total from May 10th to May 21st. That's 6 games in 11 days. That's a lot of work. And then they win a playoff game on the road at Barnegat. Barnegat's like 45 minutes or something out of the way. So, Oakcrest, Lower Cape May, they finished the season strong. Even though they lost to Haddonfield at the end, they worked their way up to being a 9 seed. But then Oakcrest, again, that losing streak at the end of the season. They lost. They had a 6-game losing streak from May 6th to May 17th. Broke it up with a Cal United win versus Pleasantville, who was 8-15 in their own right, and then they lost to Haddonfield. I know what it feels like just from the observation point, and then from the time that I played. What it means to end the season on a whimper versus ending the season on a high note. It feels really good to get a huge run at the end of the season and then at least get something out of it. Lower Cape May did not win a sectional championship, but they won a playoff game on the road. That's something that you can't take away from them. But they did it because they worked hard and they picked up wins when it mattered most, which is in the home stretch at the end of the regular season. So a lot of teams, sometimes their playoff fate is dictated by how well can you play when it matters most, and that's an exact night and day scenario there between Oakcrest and Lower Cape May.
Yeah. Again, to your point, to end the season on a high note, Lower Cape May did that. It was going to end at some point, and I don't think anybody picked them to win the sectional, but it was going to end at some point. And I was told, even if you go all the way and win, it's going to end at some point. You don't play 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or whatever.
Exactly.
It has to end at some point. But Oakcrest, again, I'll mention the point again. If they win 8 games, it's an improvement. It's a work in progress, along with many of these teams at the bottom of the Cal National.
Last team we're going to talk about is the Atlantic Tech Redhawks. This is a team that has intrigued me over the years because they've had a lot of coaching changes. And if you're a player that has played, several years under a program, I think, you can kind of understand. Like, for example, when you played at Seneca 4 years there, was Sevening the head coach all 4 years?
I was on my freshman year. I was on the freshman team. He was sophomore year. He got the varsity head coach.
Okay, so for sophomore to junior year, that's still 3 years that you get to develop this relationship with Coach Sevening, and you get to have that bond. But for ACIT, they have had a new coach every single season since the start of COVID. 2021 was Sean Coyle. They won 4 games. 2022 was Eric Wolf. They won 6 games. 2023 was Bob Elmo Wright. They won. They went 10-13 and missed the playoffs. But then 2024, Kenny Morganweck, they go 10-15, and then they are the team that knocked off Rancocas Valley as the 16 seed, 12-6. That was the game where Rancocas Valley committed 10 errors. Um, and then they lost to Washington Township. But my point is that ACIT is 1 year removed from this playoff run that they had, and then this year just didn't have the same luck. 5-16, missed the playoffs. Their only wins were over Atlantic City twice. They're a Cal United team, and then Oak Crest was their only Cal National win, 1-0 on April 29th, and then another Cal United win over Pleasantville and a Tri-County non-conference win over Wildwood. I'll give them credit though. They played, Washington Township, Williamstown, and Vineland, a Cal American team. There are not a lot of Cal National teams who really punched up to their competition. So I'm curious. First of all, I'm curious if they're going to bump down to the United because I'm honestly not sure if that will be the case. But looking at how the divisions are, this is an ACIT game, a team that only scored 72 runs this last year. They got shut out a lot. Um, but again, a 175 team average, a 6.65 ERA. One player that I do think is going to have a good season, though, is probably going to be Jay Lopez. They had two of their highest batting average players graduate, Angelo Gonzalez and Kevin Reyes, but there's also Anthony Gaetano, who was the quarterback for ACIT football, also plays on their basketball team. Listen, anybody can have a good season at any time if they can lock down the pitching. Obviously losing Gonzalez is a tough draw, but they've got a lot of sophomores and freshmen on this team. Gabriel Lastabita, the sophomore, and then Chase Betts, the freshman, along with Jacob Specht. They all had very low sample sizes last year, and when you finish at the bottom of the division, I would say for ACIT, I would expect them to get moved down to the Cal United and Middle Township to get moved up. Looking at who I saw on the schedules, that might be the
Yeah.
case. I think that is the case, but overall, I think it's going to benefit both parties.
Yeah, ACIT, it's a work in progress, like Oakcrest, very similar to Oakcrest, but they did have that huge 16-1 win over RV. The problem with ACIT is that they're a Group 4 school, but at a tech school, you struggle with participation rates. So
Right.
we'll see what happens. The pitching staff, Anthony Sicoli, he's going to lead the staff once again. Offense is a huge question mark. No current players hit over 220 last season. So we'll see what happens with ACI T and Tony
Tony Iconelli.
Iconelli's second season.
Yeah, that's if they can retain him as well. But
Yeah.
I mean, listen, for ACIT, I think just to close out our point and to close out our discussion of the Cape Atlantic, again looking at how it was, I'm pretty sure. Let's actually take a look. We're gonna show you what I see on my laptop here. So Cedar Creek, let's go to 25-26. They've got home and home versus Hamilton and Vineland. I'm pretty sure they got moved up. And then let's see if Holy Spirit got moved up as well. Yeah, they've got home and home versus EHT. Actually, I think Holy Spirit is staying, and I think it's just a 1-for-1 swap because I think, looking at EHT, let's see who EHT has. Yeah, they've all got Cal National. So if this is official, which we assume it is because it's inputted by the coaches, then EHT gets bumped down from the American to the National. Cedar Creek gets moved up to the American. And then talking about what we did before, just a 1-for-1 swap, we'll see Middle Township move up to the National, and then ACIT move down to the United, which again, it's pretty cut and dry. Top team in B division moves up to A. Lowest team in B division moves down to C. Top finisher in Division C moves up to. It's the same concept as the Shore Conference, except they call it A, B, and C, and they have a lot more teams. So, I think it's going to work out for everybody. And honestly, looking at those new alignments, I think it's going to be a pretty good year.
Yeah, hopefully it benefits all the parties involved, and we'll see what happens. Egg Harbor, I think they needed to move down. They had a struggling year, and they lost a lot from last season to this current year. But the Cow is going to be a fun conference to watch overall, and hopefully they get the respect they get. I think they're a little trend outwards in some reporters' minds up here because it's so far down there in South Jersey. But hopefully they get the respect they need.
Absolutely. Well, we thank you for watching and or listening to episode 5. I almost said episode 4, but episode 5 of South Jersey Starting 9. We don't know when our next episode will be. We never know when our next episode is going to be. There could be another foot of snow when it's 70 degrees outside.
We just
So
show up.
we just show up. He knocks on my door. I say, "Oh, you want to record? Okay." No, that's not how it works. But hopefully in the next week, the plan is that next week we will combine the Colonial and the Olympic. The Olympic's not a small conference, but the Colonial is small, and it's almost too small to devote an entire episode to. So I think that we're gonna try to initiate both of those, and then we're gonna devote an entire episode in 2 weeks to the Tri County. We also only have 2 weeks to get all of this done because we were backed up for 3 weeks. So
I'm gonna blame that stupid groundhog again.
listen, he said 6 weeks of winter. It's turning 70 degrees at right around the 4.5 to 5 week mark. We got lucky. We missed out on a 6th week of winter because you know what? If we got a 6th week of winter, that would have affected all the way to St. Patrick's Day, and nobody wants a cold St. Patrick's Day.
Nope.
So people want cold ones on St. Patrick's Day, but that's besides the point. But we've only got 2 weeks to close out the preseason, and then scrimmages begin. The earliest scrimmage I saw was on St. Patrick's Day, so it's going to be 2 weeks out to the start of the baseball season in South Jersey. Again, thank you all for listening very much. We appreciate your support. If you'd like to send any contributions to Dan Wilkins Broadcasting to make our setup look a little bit nicer, you can send anything you'd like to DW Broadcasting. We will be on the air tomorrow for Ewing versus West Hampton Tech in boys basketball. But until next week, if you're an SJSN listener, we appreciate it as always. I'm Dan Wilkins, my co host David Cohen of Rowan University. We'll see you next week. Thank you for tuning in. We'll